Hello and welcome to the People Powered Solutions podcast. This week, we are blessed with the presence of a coach and branding consultant extraordinaire. Julie Oden is with us and here to share not only her own life experiences, but here to also talk about what are some of the benefits and the value of coaching, because this is what she now offers her clients, and how she ended up coaching in the first place, as well as providing some insight of lessons she's learned over time relevant to the ins and outs of leadership. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here.
Awesome. So how about you start us off by giving the listeners a bit of insight as to your journey? Give us a bit of
Sure.
bio, if you will, of how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. Maybe I'll start off high level. So first and foremost, I am the proud mother of two amazing kids under the age of 12, which also makes me a professional driver. I've got an amazing husband who's a very hardworking, authentic leader in the food and beverage space. And from a me perspective, I am a very proud entrepreneur who strategically uses coaching as the cornerstone for everything I do. I guess if you want a bit more traditional way in, I have spent 25 plus years in the corporate space. I have a really proud track record of success with a lot of high profile brands, including Manulife, the Home Depot, AOL, Yahoo, MySpace, those kind of places. And really, I have spent the bulk of my time working with leaders and brands who have really moved into a season of transformation. So in that 25-year chunk of time, it was really focused on brand and marketing strategy. And this, as I've moved into this chapter of my life, I'm really working with a lot of leaders and companies who are moving into their own season of transformation. So I leverage my deep curiosity, which I've always had, even since I was a little girl, about what motivates people to really help them get clear on what they want and then get super tactical about going out and chasing after that thing.
Awesome. So you talk of this season of transition. Can you
Yes.
tell us a bit more what that transition, what that season looked like for you specifically?
For sure. So broadly, I have always been one of those people. I don't know if you can identify with this, but I always had this little voice in the back of my head that made me wonder if the path that I'd chosen was right. Little gnawing voice wondering, is there more? Could this be better? Could this be bigger? I've always been good at what I do and I've worked really hard to get there. It's not come naturally per se, but I took a path in many ways carved by my parents, went down the path of corporate, climbed the ladder, did the things, succeeded, rose to the next rung of the ladder. And I got to a point where I'd actually surpassed my goals that I really started to question whether or not it was the right path for me. And for me, and maybe a lot of your listeners can connect with this, it really had a light shone on it on the back of COVID. So I was a very senior leader at a global organization, had a team that was incredible, but navigating all the personal things that one navigates during COVID. I had two young kids that were always knocking on the door, wondering why mom was so stressed, and a new leader. And it was a time that was so difficult to navigate. And I felt, I don't know, again, maybe I'm telling a story that people can or can't relate to, but it was a time where I felt like I wasn't being good at anything. I wasn't being a great wife. I wasn't being a great leader. I wasn't, being a great mom. And all of those things kind of came in on me at once. And I knew I needed to get out and I knew I needed to do different, but I didn't know how.
I think I'm stopping you there just because I want to revisit so much of what you just said.
Yes.
Number one, I think people will resonate with that earlier part of your story where you talked about, it seemed like you were achieving these things and you were following that path, be it a self-chosen or parent prescribed path. You were doing it all, but there was this feeling of just not feeling like something was off, some misalignment of sorts.
Yes.
And always questioning. And despite when you hit that kind of out of the park,
Yes.
Beyond what you'd ever dreamed, you still weren't happy. So
Yes.
I'd love for us to revisit just really quickly after I talked to my second point is that, what was it specifically that made you realize that no, this is not a right fit? There's something off. But on the second point of parents and just feeling during COVID and feeling like I wasn't I wasn't killing it at any of it, really. I wasn't doing awesome with any of it.
Yes.
And if anything, I was in sheer survival mode. And I remember having that thought of,
Yes.
this is what survival looks like, I'm sure, because I'm just barely treading water here.
Yes.
Nothing, no greatness is being had. Nothing.
Yes.
To your point, I think most people we were navigating, let's be honest, something completely new, something that had never been seen before in our generations, obviously seen in former generations, but it was completely foreign. So there were no rules of conduct. There was no etiquette, no protocols. We were kind of making them up as we went along, right? So I think 100% that will resonate with listeners. And I think you'll have a lot of people feeling like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But back to my previous point really quickly, if you don't mind.
Yes.
What were you feeling? Just in case some of the listeners they've been feeling misaligned, but they're not able to put their finger on what those feelings might be about.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things that come to mind as you say that, and just prompt me if I'm going off in a different path here. But I think I'd reached a point in my career for the first time. What was obviously next was actually completely unappealing to me. So I would get into a role and I would automatically have my eye on what was next. And I'd figure out a plan of action on how I needed to succeed. And I do that intentionally in order to get elevated to the next level.
And do that being, for those who are listening to this on audio,
I'm doing the air quotes.
Yes.
Yes, right. So this was the first time where the next obvious role, which was a CMO role, it was almost distasteful. I was having a reaction to it. So that was one. And I think the other thing, when you go back to that sort of that moment, COVID was certainly a very, very big, I'm not going to think of the right word right now, but like it just made things so incredibly clear. I was reset like almost every single human being on the face of the planet about my values, what mattered. And I was an emotional basket case. I was just in a really bad place. I was really like, just use some really good language a second ago about trying to explain it for you. But I was really just trying to keep it together. It was like, I really likened it. I had two analogies that I always kind of had in the back of my head. One was being chained to a desk. And then the other was like truly this feeling of drowning. Like, how do I just keep my head above water, keep my fingers in the things that actually need to be moving forward? But there was no joy. There was no joy.
And trying to remember what true joy felt like again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you realize that, wow, this does not come as naturally as it once did.
Yes.
So obviously there is some disconnect somewhere.
Yes.
Preventing me from feeling.
Yes.
Again, absolutely.
And that whole notion, I think you're going down this road of what worked for me in the past wasn't working for me anymore. And my heart wasn't in it. And just one other factor that was kind of interesting is I have a very small handful of people in my life that are living their purpose, if you will, or doing work that actually really gets them excited. And my husband's one of them. And so I had this like right in front of me example every single day and every night. And when I woke up in the morning, of a person who was living a very fulfilled work life. He was doing what he was meant to be doing. He was excited to go to work. He wasn't experiencing those Sunday night blues, which was a very real thing for me. And I always thought, oh, he's just like one of the lucky ones. Maybe it's just not meant to be me. And I believe that. And I think what concerns me, I was literally just talking to somebody else about this, is there's so many folks out there that believe that they're just not meant to find that thing. And that doesn't actually work for everybody.
100% agree. And one of the things I often tell clients, and something I've realized over time, is in those, you saw it as, I guess that's just not for me, but there was that admiration. But if that hadn't been your husband, if it had been someone you went to high school with and they're killing it, for me, it manifests as almost a jealousy, like a
Yeah, I love that.
frustration, like,
Mhm.
and I often tell clients, think about what are some of those moments where you had like that jealousy feeling or something that you're like, oh, they get to live the life while I'm here,
Yeah.
having to go into my government, energy sucking job every
Yes.
day.
Yes.
Like how did that happen?
Yeah.
But if you were to reframe that, you start to look at it as veiled admiration. It gives
Yes.
insight into what that next chapter needs to look like. And it
Yes.
provides you kind of that insight and that perspective to say, hey, why am I accepting less than what I deserve? Right. And what might that, and trying to figure out what that next chapter was for me was one of the biggest, like the challenges. I literally went to Dr. Google.
Yes. Dr. Google. Yes.
How to find your life purpose. And I
Yes.
never, because there is no rule book on that one. I'm like, how to figure out where I'm feeling, why I'm feeling stuck at work and where I'm supposed to go next. What does that look like? Right. And some
Yes.
of the questions that had come up, although obviously, they weren't an answer, but they spurred the self-reflection needed to figure out what that next chapter needed to look
Yeah.
like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think like so many people think that you can just open a book or crack open a template or listen to a podcast and you're going to figure that stuff out, but it does take the work. It does take the reflection. It often starts and can be born from something that you've experienced in the past, and you could help others with it because you're best suited to support the people that you're the type of person you once were. And there's some real authenticity to that. And there's a lot of people, I always set up my very first conversations when I'm coaching somebody to talk like very specifically about what a dream future looks like. And I don't mean that to sound fuzzy or woo woo or any of that. You can't really coach somebody unless you know ultimately what they want to get to and who they want to become and what type of lifestyle they want to live. So I use a very simple conversational first conversation with people to talk about what type of future would thrill them. Where do they want to work? Do they want to have their own business? What type of leader do they want in their lives? What type of peers do they want to be supported around? What kind of products do they want to either build or create to support others? And I find that can be, even a conversation like that can be so clarifying that it helps get the sort of dust off the mirror, as Mel Robbins might say. It starts to at least get you open to thinking about the possibilities in the future.
What I love is that you just evidenced why coaches are awesome. Because if you were to ask me as a starter conversation, what does that ideal future look like? In that my when I was in that self version of myself where I felt super stuck, I'd have been like, I don't know.
Exactly.
I've been Googling, I don't know. But you're able to continue with questions that kind of help me put that picture together, help that vision put together. So that's really, I like that you explained that first session, because it just shows why coaches are awesome, because they help you really hone in on what it is exactly you want.
Yeah.
More often than not, we don't know. We're not sure. We just know we don't want this. That much we know.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I just want to add that I've had a few people who are like, oh, I don't think I'm ready for a conversation with you yet because I don't actually know. Well, if you knew, you probably didn't need to talk to me anyway. But I think like having somebody that is there for you, that's willing to just talk through the things, even reflectively looking back over your career. What were the things you liked? Are you a builder? What were the types of people you like to surround yourself with? You could actually start to pull together the puzzle pieces of what would actually get you really excited. And then you can actually create a future you want going forward. And it's just such an exciting process.
And then you own it because you had a hand in designing it from scratch. It wasn't prescribed. It's funny, some of the questions that you were just giving examples, Google had provided me.
Well, then there you go, Dr. Google.
It to your youth. It had to go to your youth. And it was saying, if you're trying to figure out what really fills your cup, what are some of the things that when you were a kid, your parents would call you in for dinner and you were so upset that, you had to stop doing, or is it that would make you lose track of time?
Yeah.
And so I was literally trying to figure out what that next chapter of my career looks like. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm too old to be a 90s hip hop dancer. Or that ship has sailed. But
I don't know. You can be pretty good at that, I think.
at the time, I was just like, I'm pretty sure that that's just not an option.
Yes.
But then starting to find those kind of pattern threads where I like bringing people together. I liked taking people, working with people who were otherwise unhappy and helping them feel connected again. And even at work, it's work that when I started to look at the projects that I'd really loved throughout my career, they were all projects related to workplace culture, related to increasing engagement, related to, giving people the option to provide their say and provide feedback, and facilitating and building the channels to allow that feedback to flow. All stuff that now I'm able to integrate into what I do. So 100% agree with you. Some of those questions that can be guided from the coach.
Yes.
I totally would have needed you back then. Let's just call it.
I think just to expand on that a tiny bit, if it's useful, I think that unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we all as human beings have learned to protect ourselves over time, and we therefore limit what we think we're capable of. And like a really good coach comes into a conversation knowing that you're maybe thinking a little bit small and protective about what you want. So a coach that's got the capability will help tease out and expand upon what you want, and allow you to start to see things and ways at it that maybe you couldn't have seen in the past.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, you've kind of got a very specific niche in terms of the type of coaching you provide, and it's about kind of broadening that circle, right? That higher performance, that next level. Help you see the potential that you fail to see for yourself, and helping hold up a mirror in terms of what's actually possible, rather than what you've resorted or resolved yourself to thinking was the most you could achieve.
Yes, absolutely. So the type of coaching is called meta performance coaching, and it's based, some people use the term ultra performers. It's a mindset. It's kind of getting to the next level beyond high performance. So in a lot of sort of typical workspace, you've got your folks that are low performers. I don't need to explain who they are or what they do. You understand what low performance is. You've got the folks that are kind of just, keeping, like, doing the things, keeping their foot on the gas, but they're not really trying to reach the next level per se. And then you've got your high performers. And those are the guys that are getting promoted and getting to the next level and rising to the top. The notion of meta performance or ultra performance is really about an evolved way of thinking that is, you're constantly stretching yourself and taking the goal line of what you're trying to reach and just pushing it outside of almost the level of impossibility. It comes from the psychology that most people operate at 40% capacity of what they're actually capable of. That we're all capable of stretching beyond, but we don't do it because we're trying to protect ourselves from the F word. The F word, failure. An ultra performer or a meta performer doesn't actually believe in that notion, and they've rewired their brains. And I'm not trying to sound overly complicated here, but they've changed their perceptions around failure and go into everything to learn from it. So they get in, they test things out. They have a very high threshold for making mistakes. They're okay with making mistakes, and they know they can learn from them, but they test and learn and grow and stretch.
They iterate. I love it.
They iterate, and they're the ones that are not scared to try something new.
Okay. So you say they're the ones who have rewired.
Mm-hmm.
These people woke up one morning and they rewired, or just,
No.
You, the coach, the meta performance coach, helps them, right? Like, I'm just trying to think, that ideal client who shows up at your door, must you be a meta performance already mindset when you're showing up at the door, or is this something that you help them build?
No, it really is like, I'll take away all the extra language here. It really is like moving towards more of a growth mindset. It is like stripping away the limitations you put on yourself, the ways that you get in your own way, and just going into every situation knowing, sure, there's an opportunity, it's not going to work out, but trying and then surprising yourself and then trying harder. I think like the best analogy I can give you is from personal experience is training to do a marathon. If you've never done a marathon before, the training to get there is insane. And if you're a new runner and you're doing 5K, it feels like a really difficult thing to get to 5K. And when you're in that moment, you're thinking, I've got to go all the way to 42 of these kilometers.
Yeah.
It seems like an impossibility. But when you do the work and you spend the time and you build up your muscles, it's the same thing as happening with coaching. You set very specific goals. You understand the sprints you need to take in order to get there, one foot in front of another, and you will surprise yourself by how far you can grow and what you can achieve as a result of that.
I really, really, really love that analogy because I've personally lived it.
Yes.
Because I remember when I was a new mom and I was thinking I need some time to myself, and running seemed like the most efficient thing. But, running from point A to point B, I get winded sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, how am I gonna, so I started, my mindset then was I was following the telephone posts. Okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do 30 telephone posts.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I need to get a bit more accurate, invested in my first Garmin watch and then my first Forerunner. And then I started going, and I remember someone said, set a goal. So I'd set a 5K. Once I did the 5K, I thought, I'm going to be done after that. Oh no, once I did the 5K, suddenly I'm like, oh, I want to improve on that time. And then when I was able to improve on that time, I'm like, I need a 10K. Never thought I would ever aspire. And to this day, I've never aspired, FYI, to a full marathon. But I did end up, after doing the 10K, aspiring to the half. And I did the half the first time, and I thought, I'm never going to do this again. By the time during that grueling, long run training phases, I'm like, I'm never doing this again. I don't know why I'm putting my body through this. And then I did it. And then I'm like, and I remember coming in, I had aimed for a 2-hour, when you start to train and you're trying to find your training plan, you've got to figure out what you're aiming for. I'm like, how do you know what to aim for? You've never done this before. I'm like, I think I could do a 2-hour. Came in at 2 hours and 1 minute. My chip.
Amazing.
2 hours, I think, in 1 minute. No, not amazing. I aimed for 2 hours. So it meant I needed to do this again because I needed to hit that sub 2-hour mark. So I came in my chip time the second time at like 1:58, and I was like, I'm taking it. And after that, anyways, little injuries got into play and I had to stop running, but I 100% get it. So people who think this meta performance kind of thinking is so foreign, right? You help them kind of develop these smaller goalposts until they're able to rewire it. I love it.
And it's like, I love that you played into that too, because you've also experienced it. But do you remember getting to the end that first 5K and being like, I did that. What else can I do? It really is like self-validating. And the first time I did a half marathon, I was so emotional at the beginning and at the end. It's because, again, like, I think there was like a little somebody inside of me that was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pull this off. That's why this work is so satisfying, is watching somebody who didn't believe they had it in them prove, and when I know it's there, and I come in believing it's always there, watching them kind of go through that process, really do the work of like looking at how they're getting in the way of themselves and like pushing through and kind of surpassing their goals. It's awesome. Yeah.
I love. And you already know I'm also a coach. So obviously I love coaching but I want to get into the benefits that ideal client. But first, I need us to backtrack because, Julie and I have known each other now for over 2 years. And our conversations tend to always go a bit like this one has gone, which is in my mind, completely insightful and awesome. But for our listeners' benefit, let's go back to that moment where you realized, you were amidst COVID, you were seeing your husband living his best life work-wise, and you were developing kind of this resolve that apparently that was never a life that was meant for me.
Yeah.
I'll keep going on how you ended up in this amazing coaching, rewarding job.
So I'll continue to be transparent about it. It was messy for a while. I a package, and I went out and I thought, okay, I think I'm going to explore going out on my own. And I want to be my own boss. I want to take control. I want to do things for myself. I want to set the script. But I didn't know how. And so I spent, admittedly 6 to 8 months doing tons of networking and talking to other people who had done it and done it successfully. And I learned from the journeys of other folks, which was super powerful. And that fact that is how, listeners, we have come into each other's worlds. And from those experiences, I started to carve and create my own story. And so it took, some baby steps out into the world of like starting with what I did already. So I started from my foundations. I went out and started doing brand consulting and marketing work, but I got to choose who I was working with. And I got to choose really meaningful projects. And very early on, I decided that I wanted to give back to other folks and women in particular at the time that were navigating their own drowning experience, right? Their own kind of pivot, because it could be very dark and isolated and lonely. And it was the stories of the folks that I'd been talking to that really kind of helped me have hope that things were going to get better for me as well. So I started to do retreats, and I brought in a friend of mine who's a professional experience coach who's amazing. And I would bring small groups of women together who are all navigating their own kind of season of transformation, or their fork in the roads, whatever you want to call it, at all levels of seniority and business, even returning from home or returning back to work moms, and created an environment where women could come in and experience sort of like accelerated coaching and the camaraderie of being with others that were going through the same thing at the same time. And that was when the light bulb went off for me in terms of my path forward around helping others navigate sort of the path to just a happier life.
Oh, and I was privileged to kind of witness that journey of yours. Like, I remember when we first met, you were doing your branding stuff exclusively. That was it. Actually, wasn't there a bed and breakfast notion at one point?
There was. It has not happened. It will one day.
But it was just, you could tell you weren't really sure.
Yeah.
And at that point, I remember you even saying, I'm not even sure this entrepreneurship thing is going to be a full-time gig.
Yeah.
There's so much uncertainty.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I still remember your first retreat and you coming back and kind of debriefing about it and having a glow about you that we knew, like, okay, she's figured it out.
Yeah.
Now you get to help other people figure that out as well. I think that's pretty awesome.
Thank you for saying all of those things, because it's nice to hear and get validated back from someone that you respect so much. I think like the one thing I'd love people to hear is that it's not like there was a light bulb that just went off overnight for me. I had to dabble and stick my neck out and learn from others and not feel alone, and just try a bunch of things before it connected. And I think there's so many people that are like, well, my light bulb didn't go off. So
that was it.
That was it.
Back to the drawing board. Yeah.
Exactly. Or there's those that, like, I still remember sitting in the guidance counselor's office back when I was in high school. They're like, what do you want to be? And I didn't know. And then I kept on fighting against that through all these years. I was like, I need to go back to that guidance counselor's office. Maybe they have wisdom for me now. You can come at any stage, at any time.
I love it. So who have you found to be your most frequent client? Like those who, seem to really benefit from your services? I guess two questions.
Yes.
Is there a profile, if you will?
Yeah.
And my second question is there a particular stage in their season of transition that when they usually realize that they need a bit of help?
Yeah. I mean, maybe just go backwards from what you just said. Like COVID has really made everybody think about things differently. And I don't mean to be so broad brush, but it's so clear that a lot of people are reevaluating where work sits in their lives and what they should be doing. If they're going to be spending that much time doing something, what are they going to be doing? So I think I tend to attract two different types of clients in two different buckets. So there's There's the one-on-one coaching that we've talked a little bit about today. And that can come in all sorts of forms. So sometimes it's more leadership based. So somebody who's like, I'm at this level, I want to get to the next level. What do I need to do to get there? Or they want to accelerate that path forward in some way. Sometimes it's somebody coming into a crossroads, whether they're leaving a job or they really want to, and they're in that quiet quitting space that I know you've talked about in the
I'm
past.
going to roll my eyes at that term, right? You know, I hate that term.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I remember the article. So, or even again, I think I alluded to this earlier, even if it's somebody that's like coming back into the workspace or like ready to launch their own business or want to, or kind of unsure about it. So it's like, it is a transition of some sort, and it's often led by career, but I've also had folks come in and like, they're going through a transition, coming up from a divorce or a big move or what have you. So that's sort of one bucket, is the one-on-one coaching. And then the second one is group coaching. So because I come from the corporate space, I have navigated the C-suite and understand some of the bits and pieces that are involved in even sort of resetting company culture, rethinking vision for the company more broadly, and then aligning teams around a common vision. So as a result of especially that last one, sometimes it's a precursor to strategic planning. Sometimes it's linked more to annual goal setting. But leaders are coming to me and saying, hey, I've got a new team or a changing team. I want to make sure we're all lockstep, going towards a vision that makes sense based on where we are right now. And I'd love to bring the team along and really like tease out their superpowers, but make sure everyone feels like they've got skin in the game going forward so we can get there quickly. And in that particular case, I find that the package that I offer is not only the work of alignment, so it's some individual work as well as group work to get everybody aligned and kind of marching in the same direction. I also follow it up with one-to-one coaching to really help people meet those goals that they've set together.
Love. I absolutely, and you know, I love it. Number one, because of the culture piece. And just this notion of what do employees need to feel invested and want to do more at work,
Yes.
to reach that meta performance at work. It's
Yes.
about understanding what they're all working towards, right? Understanding that purpose, that impact. And it sounds like that group coaching is kind of that perfect vehicle to help harness that collective purpose and that really understand it, but also to get them on board and figuring out, you know, how they're going to get there and what might and getting them all on that same page. And even the exercise itself, when you think about it, is so inclusive that it makes them feel like they have a voice, they have a say, they're feeling, you know, seen, heard, and valued, which again is another one of those motivational needs that I talk about in my book, as well as basically on the daily with the companies I work with. So I I like the multifaceted approach to the coaching, the one-on-one as well as the group.
Yes.
That corporate lens, but primarily, would you say that generally your clients are, you know, employed and in that career kind of transitional phase?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the reason that most of my clients sit in that bucket is because it's the world I come from, you know, so I get asked a lot about, for people, or maybe I don't get asked a lot. I actually share a lot because I think the whole process of finding a coach can be a bit scary. There's a lot of folks out there that are doing different things. And one of the things that I tend to recommend is to sort of like date around. Chemistry and connecting with somebody is really important. And I think the reason I have those types of folks often come my way is because I've lived it. I have lived experience in that. And so it's super authentic to me. I'm not talking about something I don't actually understand. And I just think that could be really powerful, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So date around, let's segue right into what were two or three tips that you could provide our listeners in terms of, you know, how to find that coach and what might that look like?
Yeah. So the first one's definitely, you know, assess your chemistry, make sure that you're connected. This is somebody who's going to be standing by your side and then helping to kind of pull back the curtain on the things that are getting in your way. So you need to really trust them. You need to feel comfortable and open with them. So like that would be my number one for sure. Another thing I recommend is, find a coach that isn't necessarily just putting you through a cookie cutter course behind the scenes, right? Like, make sure that they are really listening to your specific needs and then building a custom program that works for you and what you need today. And then also has the flex to be able to pivot as your needs may change. I find like there's a lot of folks out there, and there's nothing wrong with this if this is the way that you want to interact with somebody that might be just kind of going through a curriculum or a certain step-by-step way of working.
Moving you through the motions. Yeah. And yeah, I've experienced that actually.
Yeah. And it can work really well in certain situations. Sometimes for a group that's the way some folks work, and that's fine. I just think that, like, if you're going to invest, we're not going to kid each other here. These things are investments, right? It's an investment in your future. Make sure you're doing it in a way that is customized to you and your needs.
Yeah. And to the point of investment, sorry, before you move on to your third investment, though, when I think about how unhappy I was and that I was willing to take, I had like a magic number in my head of how much of a pay cut I would take to find a more fulfilling job.
Yes.
If it's about finding that fulfillment, ultimately, for me,
Yes.
priceless, but just wanted to put that out. It is an investment, but it's an investment that pays back tenfold in happiness.
Yes.
Right. I know it sounds cheesy, but I've more in recent weeks, I have been having conversations with people who all have that number in their head. And they're like, oh, my number was 35. Oh, my number was 55 because that's how unhappy I was. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a thing. Having a number in your mind is a thing. And while in my, arena, most employers think, oh, I can't give them more money, so I won't be able to make them more happy because they just want more money. Yeah, no, you know what? What if I told you a lot of these people are willing to take a pay cut?
Yes.
Because that's how unhappy they are.
Yes.
And you can do things that are low to no cost to improve their experience on the daily, right? So investment, yes, but investment into yourself and your future version of yourself. Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely. And maybe actually to that point, I'll roll off of that point. You and I both have also talked about the fact that we both continue to get coached ourselves. So, right, like a true coach believes so much in the power of coaching that they continue to invest in it and grow themselves. Most coaches don't believe that there's actually a finish line, that you can just continue. And that's that growth mindset thing again, right? Like, you can keep on growing and improving. I am not a perfect model anything. But I work really hard, and I'm constantly on the path of transformation, and I've never been happier. So date around, it really helps to work with somebody who has lived experience in whatever it is that you're going through, and beware of the sort of one size fits all approach. Those are my three.
Absolutely. Oh my God, Julie, I feel like we know for a fact, but we could keep talking for, another 3 hours. However, I do believe that our listeners probably need to get back to whatever their day is, or maybe they need to get back to searching and starting to figure out who they could contact to be their coach. So if they want to continue the conversation, could you please share? And of course, this will be in the show notes. How can they continue to connect and continue this conversation with you?
Absolutely. So I would love to chat with anybody, obviously, that is going through their own transformation, or just want some advice on next steps as they're kind of trying to clarify what's next for them. My website is chrysalisco.ca. And as you said, Laura, you're going to have it in the show notes, which I really appreciate. And looking forward to hearing from anybody who's interested.
And I'm assuming you're on LinkedIn as well?
I'm on
Connect on LinkedIn. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you, Julie. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm so happy that you were able to share some of your knowledge and wisdom and experience and your own story with our listeners, because I think ultimately a lot of them will identify with that feeling stuck, with that feeling of dread on the Sunday night. And if anything, this conversation might spur them to start to self-reflect on how they can make a plan to feel that feeling a lot less. Right. So thank you, listeners, for joining us. We look forward to having you join our next episode next week.